Welcome to another video. In today's video I'm going to show how to set up this material for the checkpoint that I made using Unreal's new Substrate material editor. So with that, let's get started. So first we need to enable Substrate. By default it's not enabled. Go to settings, in project settings, type in Substrate, and then enable the Substrate materials experimental and the Substrate opaque material rough reflection. And then once you enable this, it's going to prompt you to restart Unreal, and then you just restart it and you come back. And once you're back in, I'm going to show you how to make it. So first you right click and then create a new material, and then I'm going to call this mcheck, and then open up the new material. And then by default this is how it's going to show up after you enable the substrate. It's going to be the substrate EU4 default shading. This is the legacy display of the previous material viewed in Unreal used. So we can just delete this, and then we're going to right click and add a slab, which is the substrate slab, what this substrate uses now. And then you're going to connect this to the front face. And then from here I have a couple of textures that I will leave a link to where I found these in the description. You can get them and then follow along if you want to, or create your own. So to add the texture to the editor, you can either right click and look for a texture sample and then select your textures here, or what you can do is select the texture over here. Let's just save all quickly. You can select the texture, make sure it's highlighted, and then go into the material and then hold T and then left click, and then it will create a texture sample with you with the selected texture already selected for you. So then from here we're gonna drag off from the RGB and then look for a multiply node, or if you don't want to go that route, you can hold M and then left click, and then you'll also be able to get a multiply node, and then connect the texture sample to the A, and then connect this, the multiply, to the emissive color. And as you can see now, we have the texture on the sphere over here, but to get it to be transparent as it is here, we need to select the mcheck over here and then change the blend mode under the material tab, change it from opaque to additive, and then now it is transparent. And then to get the texture to move, drag off from the texture channel, drag off from the UVs, and then look for a panner, and then set the speed to something like 0.1, negative 0.1. And as you can see, the texture is moving. I don't know if you can see it all that well, but the texture is now moving dependent to the speed we've decided it needs to move at. And then from here we're going to move this over a bit, and then to add color to the texture we're going to hold 3, the 3 by that has the hash, and then left click to add a constant vector 3, and then connect this to the multiply, and then select a color. Let's go with red, maybe yellow. Let's go with yellow. And then as you can see, nothing is happening, although kind of faintly you can see the yellow over there. And then to get the yellow to pop a bit more, right click and then look for power, and then add the multiply to the base, and then from there drag off and add that to the emissive color. And then from here you can see it doesn't really show anything as of yet. I don't know why that is, but to fix that real quick, we're just going to drag and copy everything, Control C, Control V. We're going to create another one, and then between the two powers we're going to drag off and add an add node, and then add the two together, and then add that to the emissive color. And we're going to turn this into like a greenish, let's make it like a turquoise blue. I wonder why this doesn't work. Let's see if we add it to the diffuse. Does that work? Okay, so the reason why the texture isn't showing up too clearly is probably because the map I'm using is not, there isn't that much definition between the blacks and the whites. So to add to this, we're gonna select one of them, drag it over a bit, and then add a second multiply node, and then multiply this by say like 10. So now you can see it's a little bit clearer. If you want, because this is something that you're gonna have to do if your textures and if there isn't very clear-cut line between black and white. There are different textures you can use. Obviously, if I were to go and select something like the textures like this one over here that has a lot of black and white, you can clearly see the difference between the two of them. And I were to add this one to the top, hold T and add it, and then just connect this one up instead. As you can see, it's a lot clearer as opposed to this one that's a lot darker. So if you choose to use a dark texture like the one I'm using down here, then you're gonna have to add an additional multiplier node between the first multiplier node where the texture and the color are mixed together, and then the power, which is the exposure for the texture, so that the color can come through. Also, if you don't connect the add to the diffuse, you run the risk of everything looking a bit dull and washed out and not looking as vibrant. So add that to the diffuse, and then it adds a little bit more life to it. So I think I'm going to stick with this one at the top and then remove that one from there. So now we have it looking like this. Here we can remove the yellow a bit, make it look less, adding more exposure to it. So now it's like well mixed together, but now the two are moving in the same direction. So we're gonna change this one to a negative 0.1 and a positive 0.1, so that it moves in the opposite direction as opposed to that one. And you can pretty much do this as many times as you want to. If we just select, let's say we're gonna select this one down here, Control C, Control V. So we want to add a third layer to this, and then we can even choose a different texture. I'm going to choose the water droplets that I have here. Just hold T and then left click, delete this one, and then add this one in here. So now we have that. Just change the color, let's make it something like pink. And then to get this one to mix in with these ones, what we're going to do is we're going to add another add from the multiply. We're going to say add, and then from this one we're going to drag off of this add to the add we just added, and then from that add we add that to the emissive color. So now as you can tell, also this one, much like the previous one, also has not a lot of distinction between the two. Also, we also need the power that we didn't add, so drag off from the multiply, search for power, and then add that to add. And then a multiply node between the two to make it pop. Just like 10, and as you can see, very faintly so, the little droplets are there. Also, one thing I do want to note is that if you have, okay, let me just say disconnect these ones over here. Just run that over there real quick. Let's say you have, just move this out the way also, and then just copy this, Control C, Control V over here. Let's say you have the same texture but in two different colors. So what you're going to end up with is a combination of the two colors that you added onto the texture, because both of them are going in the same direction. So they, all that happens is they just overlap each other, and then two colors combine to create the color that they would otherwise. So to not have that, then you just offset the color, and then you have, well, then you have the two textures now distinguished by their different colors, and you can see each one of them clearly. So now that, remove that, we just add everything back. So now we have everything added. You can see over here everything is done. That is how you create the material itself in the using the Substrate. And then once you're done making your material here, you apply and save. And then to add the material to the checkpoint itself, you need to go to the blueprint by the BP checkpoint. And then once you're in the BP checkpoint, go over to the viewport and then select the ring. And then under here by materials, you select the material you just made. Mine is the M_check. So with that, then you compile and save. If you don't compile and save, then the material that you added won't take effect. And then once you go back to the level editor, you can see now the material has changed to the one that we created and added, and it is transparent. So if you play the level, then as you can see, the checkpoint is now according to the material, and every other checkpoint will have the same material as well. So that brings us to the end of this video, and until the next one.